Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. So in this episode of the podcast, I'd like to feature a conversation I recently recorded with my colleague, Jim Collins. Jim is one of the career advisors who support our executive format students, and he is also a repeat guest on the ExecMBA podcast. Jim has previously shared networking tactics as well as advice for those students seeking to climb within their organization, and he and I recently sat down to talk a little bit more about the career transition process for our military veterans. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Jim Collins. Jim, welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, great. Great to be here. Thanks very much, Brett. Looking forward to this. And once again, always good to spend time with you, talking with you about career services and the ExecMBA program.
Yeah, repeat visitor here on the podcast. This is now maybe your third or so episode.
Yes, you keep having me back.
Absolutely. So thought, based upon a lot of the conversations we have with prospective students, we talked to a fair number of students who are coming from a military service background, looking at an MBA to potentially help with their transition process, and thought it would be helpful for some of those folks to hear a little bit more about what that process looks like, the support that we have here at Darden for students who are coming from a military service background and their career needs, and just any advice you would have. So let's talk sort of at a high level about the process for veterans who are seeking to make a transition, those who come to the program, are active duty, but know they'll be separating. What does that process look like in terms of finding that next thing?
First, we're very excited about those individuals looking to transition from the military to the private sector. Fully 25%, maybe 30% of the executive MBA students that come to Darden are trying to engineer that transition and have a military and or are active duty or veterans. So for most that are seeking to transition from the military to the private sector, the challenge is really twofold. First, it's determining how their skills and interests and experience translate to roles in business. And secondly, it's finding the industries and companies with which they'd like to work. So for them, I'm thinking that the process usually unfolds over several phases. The first phase is typically one of trying to conduct some sort of self-assessment or career assessment to better define the functions and industries in which the student is perhaps best aligned. So there's an infinite number of career possibilities and a huge number of industries and functions that one might perform. And those kind of assessments tend to reduce that universe of options, if you will, to a far more manageable subset. They point you in the right direction for the kinds of functions and the types of industries with which you might be best aligned. And then following that, to begin some form of high-level exploration of those functions and industries. Perhaps talking with network contacts and whatever about what a day in the life is for a financial analyst or a program manager or what have you, and what it's like to work in the financial services sector versus consulting versus manufacturing versus distribution versus retail and what have you. So that's frequently the first phase. The second phase it begins to emerge once one starts to have some clarity about the functions and roles and the industries with which they want to be associated. So it begins a more focused exploration, if you will, where you're drilling down into those industries and or drilling down into those functions and talking with people that are really actively involved in them to better understand not only what the roles look like or what the industry looks like, but how does one engineer a transition into those? What are the stepping stones and the doorways of entry, if you will? How realistic is that transition? And if one were to make it, what are the processes that one would go through to make that happen? And then finally, I guess the upshot of that second phase is really to have more thoroughly mapped what that transition path looks like, which tees you up, if you will, for the third phase in which you are beginning a focused and very active job search, looking for that great opportunity in that functional area or that industry that you've decided is the direction in which you want to head.
So is that process at all similar, different than what our non-veteran students experience when they are searching for the next thing in their career?
Oh, well, that's a great question, Brett. I would say that for those individuals, or for those non-veteran students that want to make a break from their current career path and head in a substantially new direction, the challenges in the process are very much the same. But for most, however, they're typically building on their experience in a given function or a given industry, and they tend to be making more of an incremental shift versus a qualitative one that you would see the typical active duty individual making who's trying to transition to the private sector. So I don't want to minimize it. For those people, it's certainly not without their transition challenges, but the challenges are perhaps less complex.
So one of the things that we often think about from an admissions standpoint is we're talking to people, maybe a year or two or at least a few months before they are going to start the program.
Right.
And there's a tendency to say, oh, well, I'll figure all of this out once I start. And so what we're always interested in is what students can do before they start to grease the wheels so that the learning curve is diminished a little bit. You're reality testing both the idea of an MBA and what you might like to do with an MBA simultaneously. So what's your advice for veterans?
Well, yeah, thanks for asking. Of course, each individual is different. Mm-hmm. Some folks, I'm just going to go join the family business, or I have so many contacts in this industry or this functional area. As I approach my departure date, I've already got a handful of offers or options. But for a larger number, I think the biggest hurdle is simply find the time to work on one's career objectives while going through the program. Now, they may have come to Darden with the primary objective of engineering that transformation in their career, once again, going from the military to the private sector. But the hurdle they run into is that the more immediate demands that they face drive out a lot of activity and ability to work on that agenda. So they've got their job, they've got their family. The Executive MBA program is certainly very demanding. So what we recommend is a couple of things. First of all, start early. Anticipate that it's going to take you longer than what you think. The second thing is I've outlined what I believe to be a pretty substantial, a pretty sizable transition. And I think the old analogy of how do you eat an elephant? Well, you do it a bite at a time. So you keep chipping away at it over the course of your time here. And we do encourage people to start early. The second tip, I think, is to certainly use the networks that you have. Most will have fairly extensive military networks. You certainly want to take advantage of them. The contacts that you have that may be in different industries or functions of interest. But there are also a number of military transition organizations like MOA, Military Officers Association of America. There's job fairs. MBA Veterans, for example, is an organization that does a lot of that. But of course, Darden has extensive networks, and much of what Career Services does is put the students in touch with those networks for both the exploration process in Phase 1 and Phase 2 that I just outlined, but we also use the networks for the active job search in Phase 3. In addition, Darden has its own military association, so there's a core of veterans, 80 of which have volunteered to serve as network partners for the incoming Executive MBA students. So there's a lot of resources that are available.
Yeah, the thing I always think about is the informational networking, right? That just takes so much time to really do it well and to get out there, and one conversation leads to the next. You're buying lots of cups of coffee or meeting people,
yes, right.
It's just hard to find that kind of time when you're in the program. As you know, you're juggling a lot of things simultaneously. Yeah. It certainly can be done. I think the thing we stress with students from a time management standpoint, when you think about managing a career search, it's functionally like having another class in that quarter, maybe even more demanding depending on where you are in the process. And so we always encourage people to think about doing the informational stuff before you start, if you can.
Oh, yes. In fact, once you've committed to Darden, and you've signed on the dotted line, we in the Career Services are very enthusiastic about having you reach out to us. for a number of things. Number one is we can conduct that assessment that I referred to well before matriculation. And secondly, every year we work with a number of students who, 3, 6, sometimes 9 months prior to the start of the Darden program, helping them connect with relevant Darden alumni connections that they can explore those functions, talk about the industries, and try to size up and maybe begin mapping what that transition might look like. So we are very enthusiastic about starting early because, as I mentioned before, that finding time to work on an agenda, a career agenda, once you're in the program is a challenge. You do have to chip away at it, but the sooner you can start, I think, the better.
Yeah, and you have such a unique standing as an incoming Darden student, right? This idea of, and alumni are really excited to talk to you. I mean, not to say they're not when you're a current student, but when you're right there on the verge of getting started at Darden, there are just a lot of people who want to talk to you about their experience, and the doors are open in a way that can be really advantageous if you're looking to learn more about people's career and industry. And so we always encourage people to take advantage of that opportunity.
Well, I have to tell you, I've been at Darden about 3.5 years now, and one of the heartwarming things about it, the thing that I find to be very exciting, is how engaged the network is. It's amazing to me, the willingness of the alumni to spend a great deal of time with individual students, helping them answer questions about any kind of career-related things, or assisting them with their job search and referring them to relevant people that might be able to, offer additional assistance.
Yeah, and we talk about network-driven search, particularly for our executive format students, many of whom are looking for more experienced hire channels. But veterans are sort of in a unique situation in some ways, right? They may be able to find something through more of an experienced hire channel. There may be some opportunities through some of the career fairs you mentioned, potentially on grounds recruiting, depending on where they are in their career. You want to talk a little bit more about these mechanisms?
Oh, certainly. Well, Darden has a very active recruiting function here, and I think the students coming from a military background have an awful lot to offer in terms of not just the leadership experience, but which is thrust on them very quickly in the military, much more so, I think, than you frequently get in the private sector as you're trying to climb the ladder. As I mentioned, we have a very active recruiting function here. Every year we bring at least 700 or more opportunities coming from approximately 300 companies searching for executive MBA talents. And in my experience, the military students with a military background have a great competitive advantage there. They're very actively looked at because of that prior leadership experience that they bring.
And I know we've had students come to the program who were already in sort of veteran transition programs at some of these companies, or were hired through a military channel. I think of some of our students from Chase Bank,
JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs have very active transit. Johnson & Johnson has a good transition program. There's a number of them out there.
Yeah. So is that something that students could research, to sort of understand that landscape, do some of that research before they start the program?
Oh, very much so. Once again, I think it's important to first start with what are the kind of roles and the industries you want to be a part of, and then begin to drill down into those industry sectors and the companies that offer those kind of transition programs. And we can certainly help put you in touch with some of them.
So I realize this is going to be a little bit of a difficult question to answer, but we get a lot of questions from prospective students, our military servicemen and women included, about timeline for the job search and how long it can take. You've noted that it probably is going to take longer than you expect. So how do you see students they got 21 months while they're in the program? Sure. What kind of timelines do you see? What kind of timeline might you advise someone who's seeking to make a transition to potentially pursue?
Right. Well, of course, it all depends on when your transition date is. most want to transition sometime shortly after graduation. And for those individuals, once again, if you are trying to engineer a major transition, you don't have a ready opportunity to move towards. It is good to assume that it's going to take longer rather than shorter. And we think of this in terms of an 18 months to sometimes 2-year process, where if you're really taking your time to sort through all the different options that you have, explore all the different kind of functions and companies and industries, and really do a thorough job of that. While you're also going through the program, while you're managing your job, while you are being a good father and a husband or wife, mother, then we recommend that you give yourself time. Starting before the program is really a very solid idea. You'll have more free time, prior to matriculation than you will once the program itself starts. So if you can get a good running start at it, we think it will only be to your advantage.
So philosophically, how do you and Sarita and Kellogg and the career development team who work with our executive format students, or the career development center team, generally think about supporting students here?
Oh, well, we do so really through, I think, 3 primary vehicles, if you will. Certainly, we have a boatload of career education programs. Everything really associated with the career transition process, from defining your gifts and talents and strengths to thinking about how to package that in a professional brand or identity, putting together the communication vehicles one needs to take themselves to market. Certainly resumes and LinkedIn profiles, but also key messages and key messaging platforms and things of that nature. In addition, there's also education programs on the job search process, networking, interviewing skills, and negotiating job offers, and all the tactical considerations, if you will, connected with job search. The second pillar, I think, is one of we would call just career advising. So we work very closely with individuals. And we have a network of people. It's not just the 3 of us serving. We tend to be more generalists, but we have a network of career advising specialists, 3 or 4 of those, depending upon the direction in which you want to head in technology or financial services or consulting, entrepreneurship. There's resources for that as well. And I think the third pillar of our services, if you will, is just connecting people in the networks. So we are not the only source of referrals, but we're a very strong source. We have all sorts of networks out there, not just among the alumni, but also our own personal, professional networks that we are happy to introduce people to.
And I want to go back to something you had mentioned previously, because I think it's both a great example of the network in action, the Darden Alumni Network in action, and something that it seems like it's a great place for executive format students to start in terms of building relationships. So you talked about the alumni mentoring program that you have, that you've worked to put in place.
Well, there's actually 2 of them. One, we have what we call the ExecMBA Alumni Partner Program, and that's a cadre of about 155 executive MBAs who have volunteered to serve as resources for the current students, to assist them with any aspect of the career transition process, whether they're just exploring or whether they're in the midst of an active job search. But as I mentioned earlier, there's also a parallel organization, the Military Network Partner Program, which has 80 individuals. So there's just do the math real quickly. You're pushing 240, 250 folks that have signed up, once again, just to be resources to the current students.
We have 2 military organizations. We have the Darden Military Association, which is probably mostly students on the full-time residential side, and then we also have executive format student organization called the Veteran Executive Students Darden, which is which is a relatively new organization, a couple
Yes.
years old at this point, but active. Obviously, an important community within a community.
That's correct. That's correct. Now, they're both closely linked and allied. They work together. But I think the Executive MBA program saw a need to create the transitions for the Executive MBA students, the military Executive MBA students, a little more challenging than the full-time, the folks coming out of the military that are joining the full-time program. So different needs. They wanted to create a program that might address that and also speak to the transition challenges they face, which are a bit different than for the residential students.
Yeah. So, Jim, you obviously work with a lot of students one-on-one. You have a lot of meetings. You do career programming. What are a few of your best tips for someone who's thinking about, all right, I'm coming to get an MBA. I really want to do this job transition thing right. What are 1 to 2 tips that you would really highlight for anybody?
Start early. To your point, assume it will take you longer than what you think. I would recommend that you use the networks for every aspect of the job search process. One of the challenges that the veterans experience is that they feel like they can't reach out and talk to anybody until they know who they are and what they want to do. And my recommendation is no, you want to reach out to them at every step along the way. So if you don't know who you are, if you don't know what you want to do, if you really aren't clear about the function or industry that you want to belong to, that's a wonderful source of conversation with network connections and with the career advisors as well. So I would encourage you to stay engaged and to connect actively with individuals about all the questions that you have and not wait until you think you've got to figure it out before you begin reaching out to anybody.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea that those conversations can help you refine what you want to do.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's, you make such a good point because I think that's relatable to any alum you talk to is, I'm thinking about my career, have some background. This is what I've done. Right. Here's some things that are on my mind. What advice would you have? I mean, I think most people like helping folks who are in that particular position. Absolutely.
In fact, for those individuals that are reluctant to network, and believe me, there's a lot of them out there, I always pose the question, like if I came to you and you didn't know me, but I was referred to you by someone that you respect or know, and I was asking you for thoughts and advice on my career pathway or my job search, would you be willing to spend time with me? And invariably the answer is, well, of course. In fact, I would get a lot of gratification from that. So I say, well, just put yourself in the position of the other person. I'm sure they're experiencing and have the exact same sentiments. Yeah. So you're giving them an opportunity to really assist you and be fulfilled in that. So you don't want to deny them the pleasure.
Yeah, and the thing I think oftentimes students will think about is, oh man, just reaching out to somebody. There's a certain trepidation there.
Yeah, sure.
Can't stress enough, though, the impact of the Darden community being part of the network and what it means to be a member of this network. I mean, you see it up close and personal in the work that you do. We certainly get to experience it from the admission side. Just the expectation. When you're here, someone helped you. You should help someone else. Yes. You should pay it forward, pay it back. All of this is very much ingrained here.
Right. Well, as I said earlier, I find the alumni network to be very warm, very engaging family. Eager to assist. You sometimes have to pursue it a little bit because they are very busy, but almost to a person, they are more than happy to do what they can to help along the next generation of students. And for those individuals that don't have a great deal of experience networking, the Career Services Department has all sorts of tactical advice and thoughts. We can to assist you with the mechanics, if you will, of actually doing that. From writing, outreach emails to structuring the networking interviews and what have you.
Yeah, that is an excellent point because I think for a lot of people, if you're in the military, how you got that next job and the job after that is a little bit different than how it works in sort of the private sector world.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so.
And so trying to figure out how to fold networking and, some of these tactical considerations and all of this in, it's a process.
Well, as you climb the ranks in the military, it's a very structured environment. Mm-hmm. You have very specific processes, procedures, and there's a program in place for advancement. When you're in the private sector, it's you're transitioning or moving between organizations. They haven't all talked. They haven't created a universal, climbing or transition structure. So there's a fair amount of uncertainty and ambiguity associated with that transition process. And like I would say, career services are here to help you structure that ambiguity and bound off that uncertainty, create focus about yourself, create focus about your direction, and assist you with all of the mechanics, if you will, of trying to generate or engineer that transition process.
That was going to be one of my questions, is how do you get students comfortable with this idea of the sort of ambiguous, kind of unknown, I'm moving in this direction. I came from a world that was pretty certain, now moving in a different direction. It sounds like maybe focusing on process, trying to break everything down to manageable chunks. Is that the approach?
Very much so, Brett. In fact, it really is a skill development. In terms of how do you take a completely ambiguous situation, if you will, very uncertain one, and bring structure to that. And if you think about the role of management and leadership within an organization, that is precisely what they're doing. Mm-hmm. They may be at the senior levels. You've got a great deal of ambiguity and uncertainty in the marketplace. The vagaries and vicissitudes of the changing demands of customers and whatnot. And how do you make sense of that? How do you bring structure to it? How do you organize around it? And how do you act on it in ways that try to ensure success?
Well, Jim, thank you so much for your time today. As is always the case when we sit down, I learned something new.
Oh, well, delighted to do it, Brett. Thank you very much for inviting me. Always a pleasure to be here and share what I can with the incoming students.
And that was my conversation with Jim Collins, one of the career advisors who support our executive format students. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached by email at that's EXECMBA @darden.virginia.edu. And until next time, thanks for listening.